iPhone website, and basically these four apps, they move around a little bit whenever the mouse goes over the top of them. If I click on one of them, what it'll do, it will play the movie trailer for that particular movie. So this first one here is The Dark Knight, The Avengers, Men in Black, and Spider-Man. So if I click on The Dark Knight, the iPhone flips to its side and the trailer is played automatically in the middle here. Okay, and over here I can hit the home button on the iPhone and it will return me to the home page of our website. That's what we're creating today, all in HTML, basic HTML and some CSS formatting. That's all we're going into. Obviously, if you're going to be advanced website developers, get into HTML5, get into using Web Matrix and a few other programs. But today we're using Dreamweaver, Adobe Dreamweaver, and if I just have a look at the finished files, this is it here. So I ended up with a home HTML file, a CSS page, a couple of other HTML pages that display the trailers, some flash files that were put in automatically for the embedding of videos, the trailers. For this tutorial, what you do need are 4 videos that you want to play. Now in this case, I've got 4 movie trailers: The Avengers, Dark Knight, Men in Black, and Spider-Man. If you want to use these trailers, well, you'll have to download them either through Moodle or somewhere else. Otherwise, just get any 4 pieces of footage you'd like to have in your website. Now, what is crucial is this picture right here. Now, this is going to be the background of our website. So if you don't have one that is like this, just try and get one through Google Images or Photoshop it. This picture here is on Moodle, so if you're a student at Cronulla High School, you can access that photo. For all you YouTube subscribers, I will try and have it in the description down below. Okay, other images we have are just the icons that we will be using on our website. So Avengers and a bigger icon, a Dark Knight and a bigger version of that picture, Men in Black and Spider-Man, and then also the flipped around version for the pages where the trailer will play inside. Anyways, let's get started. We've got all our images. What you need to do before starting a website is create a folder. So let's create a folder on the desktop or wherever you want to put it. I'm just going to call this website and I'll hit enter on that. I'll open it up, and in here what you would normally do is create an images folder, and we've got movies, so you create a video folder. In this case I've already got those, so I'm very lucky. I'm just going to drag those files in here. If you didn't, create those 2 folders and start populating your images as we go along, and the 4 video files if you can get some. Okay, let's open up Dreamweaver, Adobe Dreamweaver. We're going to start our home page today. Now with HTML, basic HTML, to set out your layout, now what I'll do is I'll actually show you a layout in a second. I'll just go to HTML. I want to create a HTML page, and this is it basically. This is what you end up with, a blank page. And if in Dreamweaver you've got the coding, so you can just see code, or you can go into design where you just see what the website looks like. Now at the moment it looks like nothing, it's just blank. If I do a split view, I see the coding and the real-time view here. I could go over to the right side and start typing in something, and you will see once I head back over here that writing has transferred over. Okay, so you could do things in the preview mode and in code. For this tutorial, we are going to do it all in code, except for one or two things at the end just to make life a little easier for us. Anyways, let me explain a few things here. The header tags. This is where you put some metadata about your website, so information about the website. You could also put in between these two tags, your header tags, opening and closing header tags there. You could put your style, okay, so your formatting of the website, how it's going to look. There's a lot of things you can put in here, but that's all reserved for basically information. The title of the document, well, our title is, we're going to call this iPhone website. And we can now ignore the header for a little while, and let's move down and let's open up our body tags, the opening and closing tags of our body. This basically, these two tags represent everything that you see here. Okay, everything that is on your website basically goes into your body tags. Now, before we actually put content on our website, we have to decide how our website is going to look. For example, do you want to have columns down the left side? Do you want a cool banner up top? Do you want there to be 3 columns on your website, 2 columns? How many rows? Where are the comment section going to be, etc.? So you need to design your website before you start adding in content. Now, in this case, we've only got one specific area. It's going to be the center. We're going to add the iPhone image, and we're going to create 4 little containers for our little icons to go into. Okay, so let's go back to split view. The first thing we're going to do is create a div class, a div container. Now, this will hold our iPhone. Okay, this will hold our iPhone in place. So what I'm going to do in my HTML coding, before I even start coding, let's save this file. Okay, let's go File, let's go Save As, and I'm going to call it Home, and I will save it. And this is really important. You need to save it in the folder that we created, the website folder, and it should sit right next to the images and trailers folders. So I'll save it in there, and if I go to that folder, there it is there. I've got trailers, I've got images, and I've got my home.html. Now we're going to create another file that's going to go along with our HTML file. It's going to be our CSS file. It's going to be home.css, and we'll get to that in a second. But first, we need to decide what our containers are going to be over here. Okay, so our first tag is going to be a div tag. I'm going to open up a div tag, and in this case, it's going to be class equals, and I'm going to write the name container. Now this name, you can give it anything you want. I'm just calling it container. You could call it iPhone. You can call it whatever you want. Basically, it's going to be the main container that holds everything in place. Okay, now that container sits inside our body tags. Now we haven't actually told the container how big it is and things like that. So formatting comes in place with a CSS file. So what we're going to do, we're going to go over to File, New, and what we need is a CSS file. Stands for Cascading Style Sheet. Basically, this is where you do all your formatting. Okay, now we've created a div and we've called it container. We've basically given it a class name, called it container. Now, if we go over to our CSS, before we actually start writing code for the container, let's save this file, save as, and let's call it home.css, and we'll save it in the exact same folder. The next thing we want to do is actually link these two files, home and home.css, so they're joined. Now, to do that, there's a piece of code to write. Now, if you didn't want to write the code, an easy step for that is actually go into your home.html, go over here to the right side, and you'll see CSS styles. Now down below you'll see this button. It says attach style sheet. If I click on that, it's asking to attach the style sheet that we just created to this HTML document. So I go to browse and I find my website folder, and in there should be a home.html and home.css. I click on the home.css and I open that up. I click OK. You can see now under home.html I have my source code, which is my HTML code, as well as my home.css, which is my formatting of the HTML code. Okay, so over here you're going to put in stuff that you want to appear on your website, and in here you tell it how it's actually going to look on your website. Colors, font types, the works. Now this page here, we can close that because we've linked it. It's right there, and we can jump through this way. Okay, that's a really important step, to link your CSS file. Okay, let's jump to home.css, and we're going to actually specify what this container, how big it's going to be. We're going to put the image of the iPhone in there and get started. So the first thing you got to do is, because we've named it container, you have to say dot container. So your CSS recognizes with the dot there, it recognizes that you've called something container in your source code, and find that, and now specify what you want to do with it. So we open it up with a curly bracket, and we're going to say width, because we're going to specify how big this is going to be, and we want it to be 500 pixels wide. We want it to be 1,000 pixels high. Now make sure you've got colons and semicolons closing this thing off. Very, very important there. Very important. Next thing, background image, and then what you can do is actually hit browse. Now it should automatically take us to the website, and we can go into our images folder, find that iPhone background picture, and hit OK. It puts in the URL for us, and then we close it off with a semicolon. Okay, I'll just zoom in here so that we can see this a little bit better. There we go. Okay, so we're up to now putting in the background, but also there's a couple of things we need to do. We need to specify that the background can't repeat. So I'm going to type that in, background repeat, no repeat. Now usually what happens is the background that you put in repeats. If the image is smaller than the width and height you've put in, it kind of repeats itself, and we didn't want that. You can play around with those settings, see if you want it. Now the background color, we want it to be transparent. We want the opacity to be very high. We want to see through it. We only want to see the image. Now this is very important. Margin left and margin right. Now if we make these automatic, what it does in most cases is it centers the image, and we're going to add in a margin at the top of about 5%. So 5% of the website, give it some room at the top. I'll close it off, and let me just zoom out, and let's see what it looks like. There we go. Let's save that. Okay, let's go to design view and just have a look at my web page, and that's what we got. Have a look at the container. This black border represents the container. Width equals 500, height equals 1000, and the picture of the iPhone sits right inside, and it's centered perfectly, left and right, and you can see there's a 5% gap there, so it's not right up against the roof of the website. Now, to just preview your website, what you can do is go, after you've saved it, you can go over to the folder and double click on your home.html file, and it'll open up in your web browser, and you'll be able to see what your website looks like in real time. Let me just, there we go. And that's our website, and it's centered. Now let me just show you, if I remove some of the CSS code, for example margin top, let's have a look at what that does. I'll remove margin top, I'll save all, I go back in, and you just saw that it just went straight up right at the top there. So that's what margin top does. It brought that div container, so we've got this huge container, and inside that container we've said the background image is going to be this picture. Now we don't want it to be right at the top of our website, so we've put in a margin at the top, and that's what that was. Margin left and margin right is how the website is actually centered right in the middle. Okay, if I zoom in and zoom out, the iPhone will always be in the center, and that's because I've said look at the margin on the left side, look at the margin on the right side, automatically configure it yourself so that this thing is in the middle. Okay, I'm going to save all, and let's go back to our source code. Now the next thing we're going to do is actually create a blank container, and it's going to be our first row. Now we don't have more than one row of apps on this website. We've got one row and it's going to have 4 apps in it. Now you could create multiple rows, okay, and we will create more than one row, but we're only going to fill up the first row with 4 apps. But you could go on to create a second and third row, and even maybe make these work down here as well. Anyways, let's go over here. Now we've got a container, and it's the iPhone, that black border. If you're going to add another container inside, well then it has to be inside the 2 div tags here, the container div tags. Okay, you've got an opening div tag, you've got a closing div tag. If I put code outside of those, okay, if I put in, let's say, a heading, it will show up outside of my container. But if I got that code and I put it inside the container, well then it will show up inside the container. Okay, so the row that we're going to set up here, the coding has to be inside the opening and closing div tags. Hopefully that makes sense. It will in a little while. Okay, we're going to create the first row. So inside container, hit enter a few times, give yourself some room. We're going to create another div tag, and this time we're going to name it first row, all in lowercase, make things simple for us. Close that off. Okay, first row, and we'll just close that div off. So opening div tag, we've called it first row and we close it off. Let's now go over to my CSS code. We're going to create some more CSS, and we're going to specify the row and what it's going to do. So dot first row, curly bracket, open that up. Now in here, just for the meantime, we're going to give it a background color just so we can see it. Because if I start typing in width equals blah 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 and we create it, we're actually not going to see it unless there's something inside of it. And we're not going to put anything inside of it just yet. So for the meantime, we're going to give it a background color. That way we can actually see the container and make sure it's the exact size that we want and specifications. So width is going to equal 80%. Now I'll talk to you about the percentages in a second. The height, we're going to make it 10%. So we're not using pixels, rather we are using percentages, and I'm going to talk to you guys about that in a second. The position of this container is relative to the container that surrounds it, and the container that surrounds it is this one here. The div tag that surrounds it is called container. Okay. There are many different types of positioning, and we'll get to that in a little while as well. Next thing we want is a bit of a margin from the top. So I'm going to write top 20%. And I'm going to say margin left automatic. So this will make it centered. Margin right auto, and I'll close it off. Now let's have a look. If I go over here and I click in there, there it is. We've just created this container, and I'll just zoom out a little bit so we can see the code with the preview here. We've set the background color yellow, and we did that so we can actually see it. Okay, so normally that would be transparent and you wouldn't be able to actually see it. Actually, you'll probably just get rid of it like that. So you wouldn't be able to see it. But you could tell there is a border there. Okay, Dreamweaver shows you the border. But just so it's easier on the eyes, what we're going to do is basically get the yellow container back. Okay, now width we've specified 80%. Now because it is inside the main container, our first row is inside container, the div tag container. When you say the width equals 80%, what it means is 80% of the container it's inside, or the div tags it's inside. Now this is 500 pixels wide, the main container div tag. Our first row div tag is 80% of that. Okay, and the height we've made 10% of the main container. So the height of the main container is 1000 pixels. So we've made a 10% of that, 100 pixels. Now obviously we could write 100 pixels if you want, but by using percentages, what you do is actually really clever, and it allows you to be able to scale. So whenever you scale your website, it scales perfectly because you've used percentages. Anyways, let's continue. Position equals relative. Now there is other positioning you could use, like absolute and static, and we'll get to those in a little while. Top 20%. So the top of the container it's in, drop this by 20%. So it's gone down. Now if I remove that, or if I change that to say 10%, that should be up here, and it is. Okay, so by saying top 20%, we're pushing this container down to where it should be. Margin left, margin right, automatic. Give it that room that it needs on the left side and the right side. Automatically configure it. Okay, we're going to add in 2 more rows. Actually, we'll only add in 1 more row, because we're not going to use the second or third row. We're just going to focus on the first row and put 4 apps inside there. So let's go over to our source code, And now be careful, you've got the opening container, the closing main container, you got your first row. Now we don't want another row inside the first row, we want it underneath the first row, but we want it inside the main container. So that's the main container there, it closes off there. That's my first row, so it has to go underneath these. So right there will do. I'm going to say div, the class or the name I'm giving it. I'm going to call this second row. Close it off and close off the div. Let's go over to my home.css page and let's write some styling for it. So dot second row, opening curly bracket. Let me zoom in there for you guys. Okay. We're going to give it a different background color. We'll give it a red color and the same width and height as our previous one. So width is 80%, height is 10%, position equals relative. Top, now top is going to change. I'm going to make it 40% for now, but that's just a guess. We're going to have a look at where it actually sits, and we may have to change that. Margin left and margin right. Margin left is auto and margin right is auto, and we close it off. Now let's have a look at that, and it's ended up all the way down here, which is, well, it's not what we wanted. So what we need to do is actually have a look at where this second container should be. Now if we decrease the top, let's decrease it to 30%. Let's see what happens there. It still needs to go higher. Let's bring it down to 25%. No, even higher than that. Let's try 21%. That's perfect. I think that's pretty good. Yep, that's pretty good there. So 21% is what we made the top space or the margin. Okay, now normally we'd create a third container, but we're not going to do that today. It's not needed, and it will just waste time. So, but what we do need are 4 more containers. Now, one container will go here, another one will go here, third one, and fourth one. We're going to create 4 containers, and inside those containers will be our links, okay, our images for each trailer, and when you click on those, it will take you to a different part of the website that will play the trailer for that specific movie. So we've got a row or a container here, a div tag that specifies this is our first row. We're going to create 4 columns in this row. So I'm going to go over to my HTML code, source code, and let's scroll down. Now this is going inside the first row, so I need to find first row, and I need to make sure this code goes inside those div tags. Very important. Now here we go. We're going to create 4 apps. Okay, now you can name these div tags anything you want. I'm going to call them, so I'm going to name the class app1, and I'll close the div off. The next one's going to be app2, and so on. App 4 is the last app, in that row. So let's just look at this for a second. We've got our main container, the first row, and then inside the first row we have 4 apps. They're div tags. We haven't actually specified what the formatting is for these apps, so it actually won't appear yet. To format it, we go over to our CSS, and in here we will start writing in some code for each app. Here we go. Okay, so app 1. Now each app will go inside the container of row 1. So what we're going to do is specify the width, the height, the position, and a few other things, and we'll get to that in a second. But first of all, we need a contrasting color so we can see that the app is actually working. So the background color for the first app, for now, just for now, is we will make it background color, we'll make it blue. That way we'll see it. And the width, seeing as I've got 4 apps and they're in a container, I could specify a quarter is 25%. So we've got 4 apps. If each app's width is 25%, then they'll fit perfectly inside. Now, instead of doing it 25%, I'm going to do it 24%, just so that you can make sure that you can see that it is inside the container. I'm going to say the height is going to be 100% of the first row container that it's in. Okay, and the position, we're going to call this absolute position, and I'll show you what that does in a second. Top, so the position from the top is going to be 0%, so no space on the top. It's going to fit perfectly in because the height is 100%, and the left position is also going to be 0% for the app, the first app, and we'll come to that in a second. There's something called z-index, and we will explain what this is in a second. I'm making z-index 4. And I will close off the app 1. Let's go over to this side and have a look to see if it actually worked. And there is my first container inside the first row. Now let me show you, just in case you don't get your app in there, it's probably because your HTML coding, you've put app 1 outside of the first row. Make sure it's inside the first row. Okay, so there's the app. Let's go through some of the stuff we've got there. So we've said it's blue. That way we can see it. I could have called this any color. It could have been like, it's going to be green. So it'd be green. Okay, so that's background. Width equals 24%. Now, if I said the width equals 50%, well, it's going to be 50% of the container. So that's how big it's going to be. But I've said 25% because I said 24% because I've got 4 more apps that need to fit in there. Height equals 100%, so 100% of that container. Position equals absolute. Now, let me show you what absolute positioning does. It's inside this first row container. If I said the left side, give it some padding of about 50%. What it's going to do, absolute positioning, is going to push this 50% to the right. It's going to pad it up to the left. So it's just padded 50% to the left of this blue thing, and it's pushed it to the right. If I said left equals 10%, and it will come back a little bit, it gives it 10% padding on the left. If I went right, 0%, okay, right 0%. What it does, it says go to the right side of the container and make sure it's stuck there. Okay, you've said be at the right side, do not have any padding on the right side, 0%. That's what absolute positioning does. It can position your container that's inside another container exactly where you want it to go. Top equals 0%, right equals 0%. I'm going to make that left because we want the first app to be on the left side. And there it is. Now we're going to create 4 more apps. Before we do that, let me explain Z-index real quickly. Z-index decides, it's just like Photoshop layers, what goes on top. How does HTML know that we want this blue container to be on top of the yellow containers? And then I'll better be able to demonstrate Z-index. So I'll just copy and paste that. I'll call this app2. I'm going to give it a different color. I'll give it a green color so that way we can see it. And Z-index will be 5. So let me explain what we just did. We just created another app, app2. I've changed the color to green. Width and height is exactly the same as the first app. Positioning is absolute. The top is 0%, so we want it to be right at the top of the container. And left, we've given it 25% padding, so we've pushed that green container so it ends up here beside the first container. Now, have a look at this. If I said left is 0%, just like my app 1, and the green one, which is app 2, the green one, it's app 2, sits on top of the blue one, which is app 1. If I wanted the blue one to be on top of the green one, I would give it a greater Z-index. Okay, that's how you layer things. So if I gave it a greater Z-index, I gave it an index of 10, and app 2 has an index of 5, the blue container should be sitting on top of the green one. And let's have a look if it is. It is. I just clicked in there to see a preview, and it is. If I give the green one a greater Z-index, I give it a Z-index of 15, the green one is now sitting on top. So that's what Z-index does. It just makes sure that your layering is the way you want it. So let's push that back over. I'm going to give it some padding of 25%. That pushes it over. And you can see a little gap, and that's perfect. That's just so I can tell that yes, this is still inside of the container. I can still see the yellow container, and these two things are inside the yellow container. And that's why I made this 24% width. So it's going to be 4 apps, and we'll have a little bit of a gap in between each app. Okay, let's go ahead and create 2 more apps. So I'm just going to copy and paste that twice. I'm going to call this one app 3. This one's going to be app 4. Different colors. So let's pick a different color. Let's see. What I might do, I'll delete it and I'll allow the color selector here to come up, and then I can pick a different color. Pink. And so I delete, hit spacebar, click on color, and then pick a different color. I'll pick orange. Now, the next thing you got to do is change the left padding. So the third app will have a 50% padding from the left, so it'll go over to the right 50%. And the fourth app will have a 75% padding. And so we've got a bit of a disaster happening there. Let's see what's going on. Everything seems okay. Sometimes Dreamweaver's preview doesn't do the best job. So what you would do is save it, save all, and then go over to your files and open it up in an actual browser, and that way you can actually see if it's working or not. And in this case it is. There's my first app, the blue one, second app, the green one, pink, the third app, and orange the fourth app, and they're all inside the first row container. Okay, so we haven't actually put anything into our website yet, except we're designing the containers. Later on, we're going to put stuff into these containers, but we're just setting up placeholders at the moment. So it is working. I've previewed it in a browser, Safari. So sometimes Dreamweaver's preview just doesn't work, and it kind of you can switch between live preview. That could maybe make it work at times, but don't worry about the preview too much. Preview it in a browser. Just keep refreshing the page and have a look there. Anyways, our iPhone website is getting there. It's looking really good at the moment. We've got 4 apps, and I think we're probably just about ready to start putting some things into the containers that we've set up. Now we've got a folder, and we've got these images. We've got a small image of Avengers, a bigger image of Avengers. We've got a small image of a Dark Knight, a big image, small image of Men in Black, big image of Men in Black, Spider-Man. Okay, so 2 different sizes. Now, what we're going to do is just use the big sized images. Now, I will just open this in Photoshop so you can see the file size and how big it is. Okay, so if I go to image and then I check out the image size, this image is 80 by 80, okay, 80 pixels by 80 pixels. So width is 80, height is 80. All of the images are at that size. Okay, well, let's add them in. So we're going to go back into our source code. This is where we're going to add it in. So we want the Dark Knight or the Batman picture to show up here. So that's our first app. It's called app1 div class. So I'll open that up, and inside there I'm going to write in some code that is going to place an image in there. Now to do that, the tag I need is called an image tag, img. Now hit space, type in search, src, hit enter on your keyboard, and now it's going to browse. So you can double click browse. It's going to ask where is the image you want to insert. Now the image I want is called batman.png. I hit open. It puts the URL. Now before I close it off, I can just close it off like that, but before I do that, I need to add some more code. Now the code I'm going to put in is that I want the picture to be full size of the container. So it's going to be fitted inside this blue container. So I'm going to say that I want the width to be 100% of the container and the height to be 100% of the container. So width equals 100%, height equals 100%. And usually you give it a name, so we say alt, and we're going to call it Batman button, or you could call it Batman app icon, or whatever you want. It's just name. Alt just means the name of the picture. We close that off, and if I go over to this right side here, and there is the Batman icon. Now what I would normally do, I would go over to my CSS page, I'll go to app 1, and I will remove the background color, because now I don't really need to see it because I've got something inside of it. And there it is. Now that yellow background is coming from our first row container. So if I go over to first row and I remove background color equals yellow, Well, now it's looking better. The container is still there. We've just removed the backgrounds because we don't need to see it anymore. I can also remove the second row here and get rid of that. So that's gone. It's still there, but it's gone. Let's go ahead and put the other 3 pictures in. So we'll go over to our source code, and we're working on the second app now, the second app. And in there we're going to put the Avengers picture. So same deal, we're going to go image, search, browse. We're browsing for the picture. There it is, Avengers. And I specify the width, 100%. The height is 100% of the container. And I give it a name. We say alt, and we're going to call this Avengers app icon. Now, the name is pretty important. This alt, and you give it a name, is really important. If your image doesn't appear on the website for whatever reason, the name comes up. And it's also important for, let's say, blind people when they have special computers that read your website to them. It will actually read it and say there is an image of, and it will say whatever you've put into this code here. So it will say there is an image of Avengers app icon. So yeah. Blind people can see, can visualize what is being displayed on your website. Okay, let's see if that got put in. And it is. We're going to remove the green icon now. Let's go over to our home CSS and we'll go down to app 2, get rid of the green background. And it's gone. We've got 2 more to go. So let's go over to our source code. I'm going to go inside app 3 and I'm going to put in the Men in Black image. Now these images, if you don't have them, I will try and put them in the description below on our YouTube channel. But if you don't have them, you can create them yourself using Photoshop. Just grab some images from the internet and then just resize them. I'm sure you guys can come up with some really cool icons eventually. This is Men in Black app icon, and we'll close it off. App 4, I'll do app 4 as well before we have a look at it. App 4 is going to be, what have we got left? Spider-Man, that's right. So Spider-Man PNG file is in there. The width and the height is 100%. It's always good to write your code. Try not to copy and paste. Dreamweaver doesn't like it, and neither do I, because it's shortcuts. Okay, so I've made sure the images are inside the app, the div class. Okay, so the image, I specify the width and height, etc., and I make sure that code is inside the divs. If I go over here to the right side, those apps have come up. The last thing we need to do is to get rid of the background color. So I'll go to app 3, I'll delete background color, I'll go to app 4, delete the background color of that one, and now there it is. There's our website. It's coming along. Let me save this. Let's do a preview. That's how it was before, and this is how it is now. Perfect. In the preview, real quickly, if you're testing it on Internet Explorer, you may realize, you may see there is a border around your images. Now, if that's the case, what Internet Explorer does is it automatically puts a border around because you haven't specified anything. So what I want you to do is go over to your CSS page on your home page and basically write the following code in your CSS. Anywhere you want. You can go up the top, down the bottom, wherever you want. Okay. You're going to say A, image, open the bracket, and you're going to say border equals 0. Now, because I am running it on Safari, I don't see the border. But if you are running it on Internet Explorer, possibly Firefox, you may be getting a border around your images. So if you say a tag, image, border equals none, 0 meaning no border, that will then fix it up. Go over, refresh the page, and you should see it then looks like mine. Okay, great. Now, what we're going to do, just to save time, we're going to quickly link these. We're not going to get them moving just yet. We're going to quickly link them to another page. Okay.